All right.
What's up, birthday boy?
Not much, man. So, remind me what we're talking about? Welcome to Dad Habits Die Hard. We don't have all this figured out, and we aren't experts. We're just two dads who love Jesus and our family and want to serve both well. We've done it wrong way more than we've done it right, but we're just trying to fail forward, realizing that we're leaving a legacy no matter what. All right, so welcome back to Dad Habits Die Hard. I think this is episode 3 of season 1, approaching the end of the year here. I don't really know how exactly you say what a season is, but we're just going to say that when we come back in January, it's season 2, right? We're in our second
Oh,
season. Yeah,
wow.
make it super official. So we were out last week because Michael went on a cruise. Good for you, man. Glad that you were able to do that. And we'll be out next week because of Christmas break, but we will hit it hard in January.
Today we are talking about our careers, but I had the question for you of what it's been like for you of making that transition. Because you're what, over a year? What's the time frame been?
About a year.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So you're a year over completely changing, right? It's different to say like, hey, I changed jobs, but it's still like a 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever you want to call it. But it's different when you change jobs and you either, go all remote and you're at home and you're more involved with the family and you have a little bit more flexibility. And so I know, of course, that happened with me also, but I wanted to ask you now at the year mark, what that's been like, how you've processed that, how maybe you're still processing it. Because if it's anything like it was for me, it's a huge change.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say it has been more impactful than I could have imagined. And it has certainly changed over the progress, the progression of the year.
Mm.
And so but I think it goes beyond, the impact that it's had on me as a husband and a father, but like it's so much more core than that in terms of who I am as a person and my relationship with the Lord. And I recognize, correlation does not equal causation, right? Like me simply changing jobs did not result in all of those things, all by themselves, right? There was a lot going on with that. So, in terms of being heavily involved in Regen, which is a recovery ministry through Watermark, has been huge. Counseling has been huge. I've been in the Word every day this year, as a personal goal, which has been huge. Reading through the
Yeah,
entire
that's a
Bible.
huge deal. So go.
Yeah,
Why don't you just say like what has that goal been? I mean, that's amazing because you shared that with me the other day.
yeah. So, some.
Legitimately, every day your little app has tracked you.
Yes, yeah. And it actually started a little over a year ago. So if I go look in my app right now, 379 days in a row, which is I've never done that before. I've also never read the through the whole Bible ever.
That's amazing.
Like I think probably like most people I've pieced it together, right, over time,
Yeah.
but never really read it chronologically, really kind of focusing on it as a whole story.
Mhm.
That has been certainly life changing as well. So time with the Lord every day, check-ins with my wife every day, praying with my wife every day, um, sobriety. So I quit
Mhm.
drinking alcohol entirely. Um, I've had sexual sin sobriety as well, if I'm just being completely honest, right?
Mhm.
So no pornography, masturbation, anything like that. So sorry
Mhm.
if some
Mhm.
folks are uncomfortable with those words, but let's just keep it real.
That's right.
So all of that in total has led to a complete life change and a complete family change. However, if we're really just talking about career, right? Um, yeah, I mean, I went from being an executive, um, and my commute was about an hour one way. So if you think about, a normal 40-hour a week job, and then you're going to add in 10 hours just for commuting,
Mhm.
and then the fact that I was an executive, so it wasn't a 40-hour job, right? It was already
Mhm.
probably at least 50 to begin with. And so that's 60 hours away from my family. And so with a family of four and my wife working close to where we live as a teacher, and she used to be a soccer coach as well, she literally got them ready in the morning, fed them breakfast, got them out the door, got them to school, took them all to all the appointments. She maxed out her days off to do all of the appointments. She's the one that stayed home with them if they were sick. She picked them up from school. She, got them when we were fostering. She got them to all the foster stuff, right?
Mm.
She made dinner. She cleaned up dinner. And then I would get home. And so 6 years of that, took
Mm.
a tremendous toll on our family. And so I think, the big difference for me is as a dad and a father is I am intimately involved with my family now.
Mm.
And so I'm there in the morning when they wake up. I'm the one getting them ready in the morning. I probably cook 95% of the meals for my family now.
Mm.
Um, you know,
What was it before?
like maybe one or two a weekend, right?
Okay.
So very little.
Yeah.
Um, this seems silly, right? But I'd take frequent breaks from work to just kind of straighten up the house.
Mm.
So like keeping laundry running, making sure the kitchen's straightened, and I'm sure not all wives care. I would say most probably do.
Yeah,
And
most
so
probably do.
for her to be able to come in at the end of the day after a day of work and it's not chaos in the house
Totally. Totally.
is, huge, right? And so, and another thing that I changed is I go to bed at the same time as my wife every night. So I've never done that before in our 20 years of being married. And so she would go to
Mm.
bed early, like 9:30. I'm was more of a night owl, so I would stay up late. And so now I go to bed at the same time she does. And so just having that kind of relational intimacy on a regular basis, being able to check in every day. So we say, okay, what are your emotions? We take the time to do an affirmation. We talk about what were our needs met, or did I meet your needs? I will say if I had any integrity issues, and also what I'm doing to ensure that I don't have integrity issues, so like recovery type stuff.
Mm.
And then I will ask her if she's had any triggers, right, in terms of our relationship rebuilding. And so that's been happening every day. So as you can imagine, just me being present, is huge. Me
Mm.
having intentional intimacy with my wife is huge. But then beyond that, because I've been in the Word every day and working so much on my relationship with the Lord and my personal recovery, I have more often than not the fruit of the Spirit. And
Mm.
so I have a calm, peaceful presence at our house. And I have seen firsthand just how much the husband slash dad, man of the house, whatever their like affect is contagious for the family, right? So if
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
calm and peaceful, our house is more often than not calm and peaceful. If I am stressed out and angry, our house is more often stressed out
Mm.
and angry. I underestimated what my contribution was to the, emotional health of our family. And I've
Mm.
seen it firsthand this year how that's changed. And so,
Mm.
that's just some of the examples. I think on a deeper level, I found my identity in work for a really long time,
Mm.
and I don't know if that comes from insecurity or idolatry or both. Um, but I always strive to achieve to find my worth. And every time I achieved something, I was always disappointed, right? Hey, if I get a PhD, I'm finally going to feel good about myself. Hey, if I run an ultra marathon, that's going to be really cool.
Mm.
Hey, if I become a vice president, hey, if I make $100,000, like whatever the case may be, whatever those milestones were, they left me empty every time.
Mm.
And so now that I'm not finding my significance and identity in those things, even the idea of career has completely changed because
Mm.
it's an opportunity to provide for my family, serve the Lord, but I don't really care what I do, you
Mm.
know? Um, so yeah, that was a lot based on that one question,
No,
but
no. Well, I have a so no, I think that's really good. one, I want to make sure the listeners, I think what you said at the beginning, they don't hear it was just the job change that did all of this magical work, right? There's so many other caveats that played into this. My question is to the dad, to the man, to the father who's listening to this, that maybe he's in that same season, right? I feel like this is the case for a lot of men out there. Is maybe they're in the grind, they're at a job that, maybe they like it, maybe they hate it, maybe they're indifferent, but it seems as if their whole family world and life is caving in, but maybe the money is good. Were you thinking about any of these things? Like, you mentioned so many things that changed in your own heart and your own mind in pursuit of Jesus, and then your wife and kids and family and cooking more meals and, all the above. Were you aware of how much your wife was helping out in the home? And like, you're like, no, that's just too big of a lift to change the job. It's too much work. I don't even know where to start. I feel like sometimes some dudes just need to just get kicked in the back of the head off the cliff, knowing that they have a parachute on, AKA the Lord, and he's going to carry them to that next spot. I'd love for you to process, what that's like. And if there's a person listening that's like, man, I would love to just go find another job so I could be at home more, I could figure that out.
Yeah, I don't know, for everybody it means, go quit today and look for another job, right? I mean, there's certainly
Yeah.
kind of an irresponsibility to that on some level. I will say, though, however, if you are convinced that the Lord is calling you to do something, and through prayer and petition and talking to a mentor, you feel like that is the case, then yeah, absolutely quit your job, follow the Lord,
Mhm.
right? Um, that being said, I think it's different for everybody. For me, there was a fear of losing my identity. There was a fear. I felt really stuck, to be honest with you, in my job, because I felt like, this is going to sound silly, I felt like I was too important to the organization to leave, right? Like, oh my gosh, everything's going to fall apart if I leave. I can't do that to people. Um, and it wasn't until that I left that and did something different that I realized like just how wrong I was. And what I would say too, there is no dollar amount that is worth the health of your family. It's just true. I mean, at the end of the day, the Lord says over and over and over that He's going to meet our needs, right? That we don't have to worry about that we can trust Him. And I do think that He expects us to be responsible. But at the same time, like, we only get to be dads to impressionable children, for what, 25 years, maybe, you know, like, you have your whole life to work. And I think there's so many times that we are so myopic in the fact that like all we see is the ability to provide financially, and we miss the fact that we're not providing emotionally and spiritually and physically in our household. Like,
Mm-hmm.
money is only one dimension.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So as we're thinking about this, in the very first pages of the Bible in Genesis 1:26, it says, then God said, let us make man in our image and our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, over the livestock, over the earth, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. I just want to, we were created, this is even before sin. In other words, we were created as men to work, to subdue, to fill, to do all, like, it's in us. It was put in us from the creator himself. And so work is good. Now, because of the fall, it's going to be toyful and hard and all that, but like, we were created to do these things. And so there's the aspect of like, this is good, but how do we not just do it in one area? Because I think the other side of this is like, I'm really good at what I do at work, but like I don't know how to work at home.
Mm.
You know, not just with my hands type of work, but like to lead or to guide or to shepherd or to teach the scriptures or whatever that it might be. So it's kind of back to that, you know, relational, you know, I'm providing financially, but how do I even do these other areas? And so it's so biblical that we remember, and as I even talked to my boys, as we've mentioned before, that like we were created to work and do hard things. And yeah, that's just the thought I had when you were talking.
Yeah. You know, and certainly, the world needs Christian executives, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not saying no man should be an executive because it's going to ruin your family's life, right? Like,
Right.
I'm not saying that at all. For me, it was not healthy for me to do that. I think one of the things that I was thinking about earlier is like, we can't rob our families of us to
Mhm.
make us feel like a fantasy version of who we want us being you to
Mhm.
be, right? And we totally miss it. And
Mhm.
you mentioned something interesting too. It's like this idea we don't know how to work at home. You know, what when my wife over the period of that 6 years was saying, I'm drowning, I can't do this, I feel like I'm
Mhm.
doing everything, right?
Mhm.
I couldn't see that because I was going, well, gosh, I'm the one, at the job
Sure.
making all this money so that we can do all
Yeah.
these things. I'm working
Yeah.
really hard and I take care of all the cars. I take care of all the yard, right? Like
Mhm.
I help with the laundry every now and then. I cook a meal on Sunday, whatever the case may be. So like I was totally blinded to what she was saying. I couldn't understand her and what she was
Mhm.
saying. I was so defensive and so I wasn't like listening to her and understanding her. I was just kind of like justifying all the things I thought I was doing, and in essence, kind of invalidating her feelings,
Mhm.
which wasn't helpful.
Well, I think if there's a dad listening and that wants to know, I wonder how I'm doing at home. A lot of the times, what I tell dads and myself at times is, well, guess what? I know somebody who will tell you right away how you're doing, and that's your significant other, your one and only wife, your one and only one that was created to be your helper, as the scriptures say. Go ask her and be ready for that answer if your heart and you have some humility to receive what she's going to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
um, because it's in that moment of what you're saying is when we humble ourselves and we are ready to receive with what is going to be given, then I feel like change can start happening. And, you know, that's hard sometimes, right? And I think to the point of in other work environments and other work cultures, I mean, you and I worked together
Mm-hmm.
and we had so much fun. Like
Mm-hmm.
there can be work environments where it's incredibly fun with what you're doing with other people, and then you go home and it can be really hard with children, and it's really hard to see results, and it's really frustrating, and it's like, do I even have a purpose here? And so I think we have to be really careful with that, because that's exactly what the enemy wants. And so I would turn that on its head and say, how do you as a father, how do we as fathers create an environment that is exciting, and it's a culture that is, we get to make that with our wife.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like some of that is started to take place over this last year in your own household, and you're seeing some of that fruit, as I've seen that fruit in my transition as well. And it's like you kind of just get a very small glimpse of like, I think maybe, just maybe, this is some of why God created this whole thing to work the way that it's supposed to do.
Well, and I would go beyond just saying, "Hey, ask your wife, how you're doing." Like, there's this concept of like studying your spouse, right? Because I would say in a moment of frustration, your wife might give you specific examples of things, and it seems like very surface level, and you're like, "Oh, I can fix that," right? But you miss like the underlying tone, and what's really happening. Because, you might hear, oh, like she don't want to clean the house. I'll just go hire a maid. Problem solved. Now we're fine. Right. And you miss the fact that it really isn't about the house being clean. It really isn't
Mm,
about her having to cook meals or pick the kids up. Right.
Mm,
It's about you being uninvolved with the family.
mm,
That's what it's really about.
mm,
Because I'll tell you now, while I love doing all the things that I'm doing, if there's days that I can't do it, right, because I have a meeting or something, whatever, and I like, hey, can you take care of this? Absolutely. Like, there's no like, oh, here we go again, because I'm involved. And that's what she really wanted, if that makes sense.
no, I think that's a really, really good point. And I think what you're communicating, like, because both of you were burning the wick at both ends, if the husband is to ask that question with what I'm proposing, you're not really getting the answer you're looking for because it's almost like a band-aid solution that's being provided. So look further underneath that, provide more space to really understand what the core is, just like any issues that we have, right? Of the heart. So I think that that's a really good, valuable lesson, tip, whatever you want to call it. I think that's really good.
So we've talked a lot about me and my experience, but you have a similar yet completely polar opposite experience. And here's what I mean by that. I came to be where I'm at today through God's redemption and restoration of my life,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
I crashed and burned and, basically was forced to give up, what I had. You elected to do it, proactively, right? For different reasons. And so, but we ended up in the same place, which to me is amazing, right? Like God's gonna give us the opportunity to follow him, but if we don't, he's not going to punish us forever, right? He still wants to
mhm,
redeem and restore us.
mhm,
So I'm not saying go crash and burn and just hope that God's going to pick you up. But
mhm,
if you do, you're not too far gone, right? So
mhm.
tell us a little bit about your story because you quit on me one day when I really needed you, right, to go do something crazy. And now you're probably what, 3 years
Uh-huh. 3 years. Yeah.
removed?
A little over 3 years. Uh-huh. You know, yeah, totally different. God redeems and restores all that he allows, but it takes us to have that heart to come back to him, which you have had and still have. And so it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So there's definitely stuff on our part that we have to do. Um, yeah, I was clearly called into ministry, and on June 1st of 2015, I had journaled that I felt like the Lord was going to do something with their family in a big way, but I didn't know what it was. And even my wife felt something was coming as well. And so, a couple years into that journal entry is when, I started working with you, and I thought that that might have been it. And then I got reintroduced to the guy who started the ministry that I work with, that I did with my dad shortly after my parents divorced. And it was just kind of this Holy Spirit, God guiding moment where I just kept leaning into it and asking questions. And I had been praying in my journal over and over again that if he ever called me away from where I was currently employed, that he would make it incredibly clear. And because I could have died there, and it was good, but God wants our best. And
Mhm.
so oftentimes we settle for good, and we don't seek actually what God has best in store for us. And that's hard. It's hard to open your hands completely. Like, I can open one hand, but hold something behind my back. And so I just was like full surrender to whatever God wanted to do. And he does a whole lot with people who, want to be used to do whatever. If it's Noah that says go build an ark, it's like, what the heck? Build an ark? No way. So, just pursued that and was really clearly called into ministry through just my own journal entries that I had no idea what I was writing as I reflected on them, through being introduced to this guy, through prayer, through a dream, and then through a random guy prophesying over me after I accepted the position. That was a first time guest at the church we were going to. Never met him. The Holy Spirit called him to that church that day. And so it was literally icing on the cake. God had already made it really clear at that point. And so I feel 100% called, and God's equipping me as I continue down the journey of ministry. But to the answer to your question, one of the big things that stood out, I lived in a world of working in technology and serving people and helping them every single day in a fast paced environment, always on my feet. Um, And you could quickly tell at the end of the day or end of the week if you, did well or didn't do well. Did I solve a computer issue problem or someone's printer, or set up an event, or, you know, help, a college kid, work through some emotions or whatever it might be. It was really easy to gauge kind of my own value and my own identity. And I'm kind of a task oriented person. So I like getting stuff done. And I did it for about 10 years. And so, but I didn't know, like, if someone were to come up to me in that season and say, "Hey, Michael, I think you have an identity, or you idolize what you get done in a day, like you really find a lot of value in that." I wouldn't completely shut it down, but I don't know that I would see it. And that's an interesting topic and a rabbit hole we won't go down. But I think sometimes God blinds us from things and reveals it to us in other certain points of our life. And that's one of the things I like really rubbed up against when I transitioned into ministry. One, I got a whole new email account. So I went to inbox zero out the gate, which you and I talked about a lot, which was awesome. But then I'm kind of sitting around, I wasn't twiddling my thumbs by any stretch of the imagination, but my work looked totally different. It wasn't fixing computer problems and doing this. And so I like felt like I wasn't doing enough, like right out the gate. And that took a year and a half, 2 years, and even some days out of the occasion, I still am like, I just don't feel like I'm pulling my weight. And when you've done something and you go so hard every day, I wasn't just behind a desk all day long. That was really hard to like choke down, knowing that, like, Michael, you can rest in me, and that I am enough, and you aren't what you get done in a day or a week or a month, and that your meetings and what you're going to be doing is going to look totally different. And it just really was a huge challenge for me. So I like really idolized that more than I knew. And so then it's like, okay, God, what else am I not seeing that I idolized or I put before you? Or like, forgive me. Like, how often do I pray and ask God to show me things that I just don't see? Like, I'm just completely oblivious to, and I'm hurting the heart of the Father because I just don't know. And so that was one of the biggest things I think that, I struggled through and wrestled with. And I, of course, talked with you about that as well, but just was like, whoa, I did not expect this. So,
Yeah, for sure. I was looking up a verse that, has been huge for me this year, particularly because I think a lot of times we feel very stressed out and anxious, right? And we feel like, whatever the case may be, we're trying to figure out why we feel anxious. And so, one of the things that I have kind of been, reading and meditating on this year was, let's see if I can find it here. It says, "Search me, God, know my heart, test me and know my anxious thoughts," right? But you're like, okay, yeah, like, God, I want you to know, tell me why I'm anxious, right?
yeah.
But then see if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting, right? It's not just a like absence of anxiety and stress, but it's like this humility before the Lord to say, show me what's not right with me so that I can follow you, right? And do something about it, if that makes sense. And so I think it takes a lot to actually have humility and look at it for what it is and ask the Lord to reveal the source of stress or strife or whatever the case may be in there. And so I would encourage all of us, right, to try to live a life of humility and really seeking the Lord every day, and not just seeking him, but being willing to follow him no matter what he puts before us.
That's right. Yeah. It's good. It's all this, we could talk more and more, but I want to keep it where the listeners aren't like, another hour podcast I have to listen to.
No.
But yeah, the desire to live in holiness with the Lord. Hebrews 12:14 tells us that without holiness, no one will see the Lord. I don't know about you, but I want to live a life of holiness, not because I have to, or it's a checkbox, or if I don't do it, I'm not going to go to heaven. I want to do it because I love my Father so much, and I want him to strip me of anything that is not allowing me to have a full relationship with him, just like I would with my wife, right? If there's something getting in the way, aka my job, or stuff I need to strip in my own family life, kind of back to the central point of that. So as always, happy birthday, brother.
Yeah, man.
Grateful
40,
for you.
40.
Yeah.
Whew.
40.
I am looking forward to the next 40 years, because it's been such a life change this year that I can't wait to see, what God's gonna do. I can't wait, to see my family grow. So yeah, it's freaking huge for sure.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, man. Thanks for listening to the Dad Habits Die Hard podcast. Help us out by following us and rating us on iTunes. And you can also find the video version of this podcast on YouTube. You can find the link in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell to never miss an episode.